something maybe even more impressive than graduating law school at 21 is the no Instagram account.
I was like, that is not a drug that I can afford to be addicted to.
God darn it. How are you so smart? 21 years old, law school? Jesus.
Growing up kind of in an immigrant family, there was always an urge of, hey, you have to make it. The professions of our sons and daughters don't exist today.
Facts. I'm Jewish, okay? And we got the Jewish holidays coming up. Give your employer sufficient notice so that you could take time off and they cannot argue, hey, you're causing us a undue hardship.
They wanted me to be some sort of regulatory or compliance related.
Just sounds miserable.
LawFlip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down.
Welcome to LawFlip. It's a conversation about law, life, and everything in between. So one of the things that I like, one of the reasons I started LawFlip was to dispose of the rules we all think we have to abide by as lawyers. So we find lawyers who enjoy what they do as opposed to suffer through it, and that's who we bring on the show. So when I met this guest, I was surprised when he was a lawyer, and when people tell me that they're surprised that I'm a lawyer, it's one of the best compliments I can get. So he graduated law school when he was 21, and he doesn't have an Instagram account. I'm not sure which one is more interesting, and we're going to get into that. But he's also moved to different major cities, like an average of once every 2 years. I don't know if he's a serial killer or what he has going on, but we're going to find out. And he's somehow found a way to be content even though he's a lawyer. Think about that. So welcome to our guest, Guang Hong. Let's flip the game upside down. Guang, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for reminding me, Benji. And,
my pleasure.
I think the only thing I enjoy more than doing this is your weekend Sunday workouts out in Santa Monica.
We got to plug Motion LA.
Plug it in.
Sunday workouts, 10:15. Hit us up in the DM. So here's the deal, Guang. You're lively. You're excited. You look great. I'm exhausted. I am mentally, physically, and emotionally drained, but that's okay. And we're going to keep pushing through it. And that's why we surround ourselves with people like Guang, because they have life to them. They have action. They have passion. And so we're so excited to have you here. So something that stands out to me is that you graduated law school at the age of 21. We graduated, I think, around the same time, 2008, 2009, but you were 21. Mm-hmm. Explain how that happened.
I graduated 2009, and at the time I was 21. And I think what really happened was growing up kind of in an immigrant family, there was always an urge of like, hey, you have to make it, right? Like you have to be self-sustainable, you have to represent a certain quality in society, and you kind of have to just, fit within certain professional roles. So when I was in high school, I remember 3:00 in the afternoon, I would get off. Most people go home, do their homework, play in a sports group or whatever like that. I went to my local university and I was taking dual enrollment classes.
Taking what?
Dual enrollment classes. So you would take classes in the university which would act as credits.
I think the reason I had to clarify that is because I definitely didn't even know what that word was. that phrase wasn't until you said it.
I didn't either. And what was really interesting is comparing college to high school, absolutely loved college, taking university classes.
But where do you get, because there's college and then law school and high school and graduating at 21. How do we do the math there?
So the way you do the math there is in your first 2 years of high school, I was taking university classes after class. That got me sufficient amount of credits to kind of enter college as a sophomore / junior. Mm-hmm. And those credits also transfer back to high school. So I had enough to graduate by the time I was, in the 10th grade.
Okay. And then you graduate 10th grade.
I graduate the 10th grade. So I start off as a sophomore / junior in college, and then next thing you know, I'm 18 / 19 graduating from college. And I was like, wow, I'm way too young to be out in the real world. Plus at the time I was like, not really sure what I'm going to do. Let's go to law school, right? And there is a little bit of a family influence there too, where like, hey, look how great it'd be to be a lawyer and this and that. And my mentors were lawyers and they were eloquent and, dressed well.
Where'd you grow up?
Miami.
Okay. Cool.
So not surprising, right?
Yeah.
Not surprising. And I went to law school and I was like, what did I get myself into?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was very apparent very early on. I was chewing off on something that was way bigger than what I was capable at the time.
Okay, before we get into how big of a bite that was, something almost, or maybe even more impressive than graduating law school at 21 is the no Instagram account. So explain to me how you accomplish that, because that is huge.
Well, actually, it's not that hard because you and I actually grew up in the age of Facebook.
Yes.
Right. And it's really interesting because I guess I didn't get as influenced by IG as the crowd of the West, the LA population. And I knew how addicted I was to Facebook already. And I was like, wait a minute, this is going to be just another time suck. Right. And I'm going to be checking out other people's photos. And even worse, I was going to make sure every one of my own photos were going to be perfect. I was like, that is not a drug that I can afford to be addicted to.
I appreciate it. You staying away from the drugs that you'll be addicted to. I don't know. Instagram versus the 21 law school thing. It's close. But after law school, what do you do?
So after law school, it was 2009. It was... And
where'd you go? I'm sorry. Where'd you
University of Miami. University
cool.
of Miami. I was in Florida at the time. And it was very apparent to me that I wasn't going to be able to find a job within Florida. So after law school, one of the first things I did, was like, you know what? Is there any outstanding bars that I'd like to take somewhere else just to kind of look for a job and still kind of keep myself busy?
Right.
And I don't know why, but at the time I said, I took the Florida bar. I passed. I think I'm going to go for the California bar because there was always a part of me that said, I would love to live in California one day.
Yeah.
And I know how stringent the standards are in terms of admission. There is no reciprocity, which means that just because you're a lawyer in Florida, you can't just all of a sudden get a waiver to practice in California.
Correct.
Right. So I did that.
Okay. So you take the California bar.
Took the California bar. It's like, all right, this is probably a good time to move back to the East Coast. Move back to the East Coast, and I finally find a job in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
It was in a law firm. It was in a large law firm. I was initially contracted on as an attorney. And then I kind of worked my way up to become a staff attorney within the firm. And, it was just not what I really expected.
Why?
At all. Because I think, even nowadays into 2020, you watch shows like Suit and, you go to court and you see the glamour and the glitz. And you're like, what you don't know about the legal profession, it's one that's really paper driven and it is very draconian. Mm-hmm. It's like some of the stuff you talked about. The basics of using a system that tracks time that was like from the 1990s. Right. And then just being able to argue over the font size and the format. And I was like, wow, I'm 22. Do I want to be doing this for the next, 30 years of my life?
Right, because your years are shorter than everybody else's. Because most people would have to work till they're like 70 or 80, but you do the truncated version. It's only 30 years.
Benji, and I'm actually really glad you brought that up. One of the things I always say to people when they're like, "Oh wow, you're like a lawyer and you transition so far in this," I was like, "Look, there was detriments of going to law school super early on, but the benefit of that, if there was any benefit, was that I was still in a stage of my life where I had relative flexibility. Right. So what I mean by that is most of my friends who graduated law school were in their late 20s, early 30s. So what's coming up? Wife, kids, house,
responsibilities
versus me, which was like, oh, hey, welcome to the real world, college grad.
Right,
That's what happened.
Okay, so you're at that job, and then take us through that point for an overview, a sort of quick overview from that point to where you transition out of being a traditional lawyer.
Absolutely. So I stayed at that job in Washington, D.C. for 2 years. Subsequently moved to San Francisco, still practicing law. And at that point, I realized I wanted to make a pivot in terms of both industry outside of law and in terms of the role, like not being a lawyer, right? And there was a common string through all of this, which was not really by design, which was most of the cases I worked on were transnational because my language skills, and 2, healthcare related, just because that's what was sexy at the time.
Sure.
And I said, you know what? I love to get into the healthcare industry, but I don't want to do it through a legal avenue. And surprisingly, that was very hard. Very, very hard to do.
But you applied for a bunch of positions, couldn't get them?
I couldn't get them. They wanted me to be either in-house counsel or some sort of regulatory or compliance related.
Right.
Which is
just sounds miserable.
Just horrible. It's just like scratching my nail, which I don't have that much of on a blackboard, right? So I said, okay, all right. At the time, I had a plan B. My plan B was I'm going to apply to some business schools, and it's usually a good avenue to transition out.
Yeah.
Might work, might not. I go to business school. It wasn't like that at all, because first month I get there, I'm like, oh, there's this thing called investment banking, and they think I am awesome, and they want me to go to New York and be part of their like program, and after the first year. Absolutely, sign me up.
Man, so you were taking a couple of
Oh
shots.
my God, I was just getting suckered in so much.
So you went to, where'd you go to? You went to Kellogg, right?
So I went to
Isn't
Kellogg.
that's one of the best business schools in the country, isn't it?
It's good. I mean, it's decent. Yeah.
So you go there, and you did that for about 2 months. And
I
then you
did that for
graduated?
3 months. I did that for 3 months during my summer internship, and I said, you know what? This is not why I came to business school.
No, but I mean, how long did business?
Oh, it was 2 years. So it was
Okay.
2 years. So 2 years.
Okay.
2 years. First summer, ended up interning in New York, Citigroup Healthcare, and I had a realization 3 a.m. in the morning, which was like, you know what? I don't think it doesn't matter how much they could be paying. Like, I don't think I'm going to be okay with this if this is just being an ongoing thing.
Right.
I'm not
That's the
that
thing
much of a
about tying-
masochist.
That's like the thing about tying your compensation to time. It's like
Absolutely.
as long as your compensation requires you to be doing something like 15 hours a day,
Absolutely.
that means that you never will have peace, because in order to make the compensation, you have to be working 15 hours a day. There has to be some ability to make some upside, maybe when you're not working, or a piece of something. So I could see, So you have that realization.
I go back my second year, right? And I said, okay, so I have a healthcare background, have this legal thing, have this little bit of a finance thing. Like, let me reach out to the big healthcare companies and see if I can like poke any sort of interest. And it was a struggle. Like, I have to say, it was pretty much a struggle until the very end. There was a few opportunities that came up, one of which was my previous job, ended up taking me here to LA.
Oh, cool.
And I was working in ops finance and kind of like investment finance for a healthcare company nationwide.
Is that just for laymen like me? Is that, I'm assuming they get a bunch of premiums and then they need to invest the money?
No, so that's actually a really good question. So 2 things, which is how do you look at the operations of like a hospital, a clinic, right? But just from a financial perspective, right? What are the inputs and the leakages? Like, what's causing the money in the business to make money and lose money? That's the simplest way to think about it, right? And that was one. And then the other thing, which I think is very useful when we think about decisions we make in life, is, okay, so let's say we make an investment decision. Most of the time we make an investment decision based on our emotional kind of how we feel, right? There's actual numbers that are attached to those decisions.
Sure.
So how do you systematically and logically think about those decisions? And apply that to the healthcare space.
Wow.
So
that's a complicated
so
feat
apply
only
that to
Guang
the
could
healthcare.
handle.
not at all. And then so I did that for another almost 2 years, and I said, hey, it's time for another transition.
Did you, like, during all these transitions, did you start to think, like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm this really smart dude who is so capable and, like, I can't find my way.
Well, actually, it's interesting you say that. Definitely not on the smart part, but I did feel like the more older I got and the more kind of dabbling I had across different fields and roles, I felt more like, hey, you know what? It's okay that you don't know. And it's normal for you to not have it figured out right away. And I think that's a great contrast to like why I picked the legal profession in the very beginning, which was like, hey, it's expedient and it's easy. Like you go to law school, you do X, you do Y, and then you end up here and someday you make it a partner.
Right.
Which nowadays is not even true anymore, right? But there is that level of simplicity in there, if you can call it that.
Sure.
It's just not.
That makes sense. It's like what we perceive to be as a safe choice.
Absolutely.
And then, so eventually you get to your current job, which is what?
So the way I explain my current job is that I work in healthcare contracting. So what that means
sounds like it's a job where you have to explain.
So this is interesting. So what that means is I make sure that your doctors, when you visit them, spend the right amount of time with you by making sure they're compensated appropriately. So what does that mean? So there's only two ways that doctors can really, increase their income. One, they see more patients, which nobody likes. Two, we get insurance companies to negotiate the appropriate rate for the service they render.
Sure.
Now, what I think a lot of people don't know is that in the healthcare space, physicians are moving away from an individual practice system to large association groups. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking about 4,000 doctors, 5,000 doctors with specialists covering the greater LA area, right?
Why are they doing that?
Because overhead is too much. It's just, you have no negotiating power, right? As a physician, either as a primary physician or a specialist, if you're not part of a greater group. Because like you go to the healthcare plans of the world, the Cignas, the Anthems, and the Molinas.
So it's almost like almost like an employee union. It's almost like a union.
It is a professional association.
Yeah.
It is a law firm.
Sure.
If you think about that. And what you see as a result of that is, if you're an individual physician, you can't cover your overhead.
Yeah, we see that all the time.
It just doesn't happen.
The idea of being a doctor and lawyer has somehow become work hard and make like an average amount of money at best. It's not what we used to think it was.
And I like to add a comment to that, which is one of the things I noticed looking back is I think we're living in a very special stage in our life in which the professions of our sons and daughters don't exist today. And we're probably not going to know about that profession until maybe 5 years before they go to college, or even 5 years after. Because if I look at the people who are in product management and Amazon and this and that, like, I didn't know anything about that. Like, what is a product manager?
Right. And they're the ballers of today.
Exactly. And they're the ballers of today. And
so like, literally, when you go to work today, what do you do?
So there's
or when you remote
from work. When I remote from work. So two aspects. So I was actually very surprised when I went back to this job, going to this job. There is actually a huge legal component to it, which is we negotiate the contracts between the plans and the large physician groups, right? So I make sure that the contracting terms are appropriate and they are enforceable.
Why is that not? Why is that better than whatever you're doing before as a lawyer?
You know what? That's a great question. And I would say it's because you see the A to Z, right? Meaning that I'm looking at the contract, I'm getting on a call tomorrow to the other side versus I read a legal issue, I flip open a book, it gets reviewed by like 2 senior associates, goes to goes to maybe a junior partner, and I never know where that ends.
Right.
It's just the lack of result.
So you also, I think, are comparing litigation to transactional work too, because
Absolutely.
there's an aspect
Absolutely.
of transactional work where there's
Absolutely.
a closure of a deal, for instance.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. I absolutely love litigation work when it's actual litigation. Like when
Right.
I was in law school, one of the things I really shined on was actually doing trial advocacy work, right? So like, I mean, unfortunately in the legal arena, most of the trial advocacy work that you see nowadays is in the criminal space or the non-civil space,
Sure.
right? But I absolutely love that because it gave me the right sort of energy. And rather than some of the stuff that just felt like more of an energy drain.
Sure. So how did you, I've heard you talk about this concept of negotiating your success. What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is when we go into a job, I think a lot of times we are very big about negotiating our salary, right? Like, is the compensation right? Is the severance package right? And all this is right. What we don't negotiate is what does it mean to be successful in this role, right? And this is really important because if you define the parameters of that, you have a much more structured conversation when it comes to your annual reviews,
Sure.
or your bonus reviews, or your promotional reviews, right? And the biggest part where I see that popping up is when, let's say, what is important today is not what's important later on. So maybe today is, hey, I want you to meet certain metrics on sales, right? But then 6 months later, which is much closer to your promotion, they're like, well, what we care about is customer reviews. And you're like, wait, what about the sales? Like,
Right.
how
They
does
moved
that
the
align?
goalposts.
Exactly.
So to the extent that you don't want to be an entrepreneur, because there are people that just don't really have that in their blood, and they want to live in corporate America. How do they know when to leave a job? Like you've sort of transitioned a few times. How did you know when to leave?
And I think this is something I really discovered a good answer to at my last job, which is do not overstay your welcome. And the reason why you know that you're overstaying your welcome is weird stuff starts to happen. It's like when you overstay a relationship, right?
Yeah.
And then all the stories you tell your boyfriend or girlfriend, the weird stories starts coming out. Like, she threw a shoe at my car. And then you're like, wait, what? When you start telling these crazy stories to your friends and family members about your coworkers, okay? And when they remember your coworkers' names,
Right. It's time to go.
it's time to go.
So now you're in this role. You found some contentment around being a professional, and you've gotten out of the what a lot of people experience as misery as a lawyer. What do you think it is about your mindset that has allowed you to find this contentment around work and maybe life?
I think the one of the big part there is admitting to yourself and being comfortable with acknowledging what you don't like, right? I think it's very easy to say, hey, I should be the best at everything I do. And like, if I'm not there, then you know what? That's failure on my part. And just realize, like, people use that mentality against you. And I don't need to mention certain professions that love doing that.
Yep.
Oh, you guys are great. You guys can work 29 hours a day because you're one of us.
Right.
And you're a part of the Holy Trinity. Like,
Right.
nobody cares and nobody knows.
Right.
Right. And I think if you can acknowledge that, like, hey, what do I like to do? What do I not like to do? And here's the thing. Once you figure out what you don't like to do, set a timeline and tell your friend about it and tell that person to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing about it to get out of that?
Yeah, I think that one of the concerns about that is that we have all these rules about what it is to be a lawyer. We talk about this kind of ad nauseum, but it's very real. And what I try to do, and it's been really helpful to me, is I really try to do things that I'm either really good at or I really enjoy. And sometimes there are things that I'm really good at that I don't necessarily love, but I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do something that I'm really good at that I don't necessarily love, but I'm not willing to do something that I'm not good at and I don't love. I can't do that. And somehow you find a way to, if you focus on those things and you're able to say no to doing the other things, you find other people to help you, and you find that you enjoy yourself more, you do a better job, and everybody's happy around you. And so I think that's incredible advice. And so what advice would you give to the 18-year-old Guang?
I would say that, like, make your choices wisely, which is, do not think that time is your enemy. Time is your ally. I think when I was 18, I was so in rush to become an adult. And, just like living in Miami, fast life, wanted to go to South Beach, do this and that.
I mean, South Beach is pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing, but your profession doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And your life choices doesn't have to be that way. And when you are young, right, when you have time, why would you give that up? Right? To trade for what? That you graduate a year early, 2 year, like, that means nothing. I mean, I'm 32 now.
Jeez.
It absolutely means nothing to me.
I feel like you've lived like 3 lives and you're like 32. It's crazy. Okay, that's amazing. Let's move to deal of the week. So Guang, my deal of the week is perspective. So I was bitching to a friend of mine about being overloaded with too much going on, right? He sends me a text back saying, sounds like a blessing, man. So very quickly, I bounced out of that pity party, and I do have some big challenges right now, but in general, like, my family and friends, they're healthy, and like, I'm overloaded with opportunity that I've sort of designed for myself. So what the fuck?
Yeah.
Perspective is things are good and life is good. It's really, I do believe in mindset. Like, it's one of those things that I've learned more and more over the past few years, which is you could be in the same exact situation, you just have a different perspective, and you need to surround yourself with people like Guang, people like my friend Tim, who mentioned that to me, and others who just are able to shine back on you. Like, they really care about you, genuinely care about you, and are willing to say like the tough things, or maybe not even tough, just like the real things back to you. So what's your deal of the week, Guang?
I think it's focus. So I was reading an article the other day, and a short little article that was like, hey, did you know the only bird that dares to gouge an ego is a crow? But when the crow is gouging an ego, the ego doesn't respond or try to bite it back or anything like that. It just flies higher and higher and higher. And the crow, because not being able to, breathe at that certain altitude, will just fall off.
Oh my God. That's
so what's
amazing.
really interesting about that is, if you have a focus on something, whatever it may be, professional, personal, right? And you pursue that focus, things that don't matter will become very apparent and very quickly.
I love that. That is amazing, Guang. Okay, on to legal tip of the week. This is presented by the lovely law firm of Smith and Benowitz. You see those guys? They do personal injury, employment, and class actions. And we have a new number. It is 1-833-LawFlip. Repeat it with me, Guang. 1-833-LawFlip. Call us, everybody. We can answer any and all legal questions for you, okay? So, what is my legal tip of the week? I'm Jewish, okay? And we got the Jewish holidays coming up. It's like there's a holiday every day, every other day. I mean, it's a holiday.
Shabbat.
Well, Shabbat is every Friday. But right now in September and October, the holidays start to roll in. And so if you have a holiday that you want to take off for, give your employer sufficient notice so that you could take time off, so that they cannot claim that you are giving them, what do I want to say?
Hardship.
So yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to say. This is why you have people like Guang on the show, to help you with your legal tip of the week. So you want to give your employer sufficient notice so that you could take time off and they cannot argue, hey, you're causing us a undue hardship. Mm-hmm. So if you want to take your time off for the religious Jewish holidays, give your employer enough notice. Guang, what's your legal tip of the week?
So mine is actually employment related as well, which is it piggyback on something you talk about, which is having things in writing. I know a lot of people are in transitions between jobs, and it feels like a huge struggle, and the relationship is very asymmetrical when you're looking for a job and someone else has the offer, right? Make sure the offer clearly states in writing what you negotiated. I can't tell you how many times where what's promised versus what's given completely do not confirm with each other.
Facts. Okay, that was amazing. Guang, thank you so much for coming on the show. You were incredible. We're coming in just on time for our producer, Arian. He wanted around 30 minutes. We gave the guy around 30 minutes. He's telling me to keep it moving. Okay, guys. Guang came in. He's a hero. He's beautiful. Look at this guy. He's like that perfect blend of corporate America, but entrepreneurial and God darn it. How are you so smart? 21 years old, law school? Jesus. Okay. So the bottom line is you got to focus. You got to take your time. You got to not worry about rushing into things. You got to do it like Guang says. Okay. So listen, we really appreciate it. How do people get in touch with you?
Very easily. You can always find my LinkedIn.
Okay.
GuangHong. I'm the only Guang Hong on there. So
is that true?
I am.
Dude,
I really
insane.
am.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
Dude, you got to market yourself
I
as like
know.
the only Guang Hong.
I'm the only person who shares their LinkedIn URL versus their IG handle in LA, which is
that's because you don't have IG.
Exactly.
That's sick. Okay. So you should be, if you were on IG, which you're not going to be, you'd be the one and only Guang Hong.
The one and only Guang Hong.
All right, Guang, we really appreciate LawFlip. We hope you got as much out of that as I did. The guy is amazing. We appreciate his time. Thank you so much, Guang. It was amazing. Thanks again.
You.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down.
Okay, so Arian, they're asking where they could find us. So for LawFlip, it's at LawFlip and LawFlip.com. For Smith & Benowitz, our law firm, which does personal injury, employment, and class actions, you can find us at Smith Benowitz and SmithBenowitz.com. For the personal stuff, like where you're really going to find the juicy stuff, at Benjy Smith and BenjySmith.com. At Wages Guru and LewisBenowitz.com for Lewis. Oh, so LawFlip is produced, directed, and edited by the young legend Arian Tabibian. Visual effects and compositions by another young legend, Oren Azad. Intro music provided by Pen Practice. Pen Practice, what is it? Premium instrumentals for upcoming artists by the music industry's top producers. For more info, visit penpracticemusic.com. I had so much fun recording the intro song with my man Hilton Deuce Wright. Looking forward to hearing more and more from Pen Practice. So the LawFlip identity, this hot logo that you're looking at, created by Garrett Whiston and Travis Nagel. Special thank you to Shai and Seth from the Horwitz Marketing Agency. And lastly, a huge thank you to our beautiful wives, Julie and Lisa, for supporting our vision, and all the love to all of our 4 boys combined. Disclaimer, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is only intended to provide general information and opinions about legal and other concepts, and is not intended to be used as a source of legal advice or relied on for legal advice. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state.